drum roll. Looks like we are live. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. So, tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about dealing with depression, what that is, and how I've dealt with that through the years and the various times that I've felt depression. So, if this is your first time joining me, my name is Tina. I'm a happiness coach. I help people go from being in a dark place, dealing with dark thoughts, depression, anxiety, any of those things, and how to help shift you into a much more positive space. Okay? So, the topic tonight, like I said, is dealing with depression. And I remember when I first started in recovery healing. I'm doing well, Saeed. How are you? That was a short nap you had. So when I first started and starting to recognize what depression was, at first I thought I got it confused with like sadness and stuff like that, but depression for me was more of not being able to move forward. And it was this whole feeling of being stuck and thank you, being stuck and not feeling good, lethargic, those kind of things. And when I heard somebody explain that depression was anger turned inwards, that made a lot of sense to me because what I found as I was going through my healing journey is I wasn't able to express anger. That was something that was very dangerous growing up, that if you expressed any angry feelings, then um, that caused a lot of problems. Heck, just even speaking up in a polite way got me into a lot of trouble. And I often got in trouble for doing the right things, not the wrong things, which was kind of messed up. And being able to become aware of how that affected me throughout my childhood and through my adult life, it wasn't the things that I did wrong that I got in trouble for. I got in trouble mostly for the things that I was doing right. And that really ended up having an effect on me. And because it was so dangerous to be able to speak up about those things, I often turned that anger that should have been expressed outward, that I should have been able to speak up about, and I ended up turning that inward on myself. And so when I started to make that connection, one of the things I had to start learning how to do was being able to speak up about what it was that I was upset about. And that was a really, really scary thing when I first started doing that. And I don't know about you guys, but if you haven't been used to speaking up for yourself, or that when you did speak up for yourself that you got labeled in certain ways, what are those kind of things that you got told, and how does that still currently impact your life in today, right? um, and when we understand where these patterns and these things are coming from, it's not just a matter of recognizing the pattern and becoming aware of it. That's not enough to actually change the behavior. And so, what I did in the beginning is I started speaking up about little things that didn't really matter, that weren't so scary, but it was something that I still actually had to practice because my default setting was to say, no, it's okay, don't worry about it, it doesn't bother me, it's no big deal. And I still do that for the majority of stuff. I don't tend to be confrontational or fight battles, but when I do speak up, I do make sure that my point comes across very clear, concise, and to the point, right? Of making sure I know that I need to speak up about this. I usually, when I do speak up about things, it's very non emotional, it's very logical. Now, whether or not that's a good thing or not, but that is a way for me to be able to speak up in a way that I feel comfortable with. And I usually buy myself some time because I don't want my airy side coming out where I will say something and I know I have the capacity to be really fucking mean. And I don't like that. And I don't want that guilt. So I really am active at what I do, how I express myself. And I do that in a way that I'm clear. I understand how I feel, what my part is, what the other person's part is. Um, and just being able to speak that truth. Now, when you do go to speak your truth on something, what you have to allow for is that somebody else may not agree with that truth. So being prepared that if you are speaking that truth, that you are speaking it not because you need that other person to change their behavior, but because this is something that you truly feel like you need to express, and keeping it inside is actually harming you. When you recognize that, like understanding when you suppress these emotions, what goes on in your physical body, how does that impact you when you hold this stuff in, right? It starts to cause problems within your health, your mindset, your well being, your overall ability to feel not only the challenging feelings, but positive feelings, right? Because if you repress one emotion, it ends up repressing a bunch of them, and then you end up feeling numb, and then you feel depressed because you don't feel like there's any point to life. And so when that kind of stuff ends up coming up for you, being able to be aware of it, recognize it, and then start to make those changes in little ways. And that started with me having to ask myself, how do I actually feel about this particular situation? And I still control my reactions. I don't like lash out going, oh, I'm going to get you. And if, in fact, if you are to the point where you are actually feeling like you need to lash out, that you need to like pop off on somebody, it's because you have let too many things slide that you have not actually spoken up about. And so when I get to that point where I want to lash out, I have to examine how many times before did I let this go, saying it was okay, it's not a big deal, I don't want to fight about it, it's fine, you know. You know, when you do that kind of stuff, and then you get to the point where you're ready to snap on somebody, you really need to take a look. How many times did you actually let it slide when you weren't really letting it slide? You were just not willing to confront it at that particular moment, right? You do this enough times, you will start to become aware of your own behavior, which is truly the only piece that we are able to control ourselves. And that alone is hard enough. It's hard enough to control our own behavior, let alone trying to control somebody else's behavior. I got my plate full. I don't know about you guys, but whoever put me under assignment for this character, mm, pain in the ass. But you know, at the same time, it's also freeing knowing that I have the ability to actually control my own behavior. Um, that doesn't mean that I have to just suck it up and not speak out about the things that do bother me. I just make sure that I do it in a way that is controlled, and it is, I'm clear about how it is that I feel. And when I do speak up, I speak that truth once, and I let the expectation of how the other person is going to react to the situation. They may take it well, they may get defensive, they may try to argue back, well, I did that because you did this, and that's okay, that they are allowed whatever reaction that they have. Now, don't accept unacceptable behavior, of course, right? But um, I have to allow them some space, some freedom, some time to process how they feel. Because I know if it was done the other way around, where somebody is speaking up to me about something that they are not happy about, that I would have to I would want that time to process how I feel about it, how I thought about it. And there's been times where somebody has spoke up to me about something, and maybe at first I get defensive or I get upset about something, and I want to go into this defensive mode of explaining, because that's one of my trauma responses. I always feel the need to explain why I did what I did, and that's not actually helpful, right? And it probably errs a little bit more on the narcissistic side uh, traits, but I think it was more a trauma response of having to explain myself, because growing up, I got accused of a lot of different things, and stuff that was good stuff I got in trouble for. It was really bizarre. But that was also a form of control that was used by the abuser. And he didn't like the fact that I actually stood up and I spoke up about how I was feeling and what was going on with me, and that I didn't think that the things that he was doing was actually correct. And the more I tried to use logic, the more I got beat down for that. And it reminds me too, like there was this. There's been many circumstances where I think and I got told this a lot, you're too smart for your own good, and I would get in trouble a lot for being smart. So consequently, I learned to actually hide my intelligence. I learned to not display it, to play dumb, to go along, to just placate, because the more I showed my intelligence, the more I got in trouble. And it really caused this whole fear reaction for me. And I remember the very first time I was actually thinking about this today is so one of my first sexual abusers, um, when I was 4 years old, um, he had just put this chain lock on the door, like it was one of those. I don't know, it's like brass or whatever, and you kind of have the chain and you just slide it across, right? And he had put it on there, and he was like, there, now nobody can get in. And I looked at it and I'm like, I could break that. And I'm four. Keep in mind, I am 4 years old. And when I look at other 4 year old children now, and I'm like, holy shit, I was actually really, really smart. And he's like, no, you can't. And I got in trouble for thinking that I was a big talker and everything. And sure enough, I went over to the door, I looked at it, and I closed the door, and then I gave it a hard yank forward, and I broke the chain. And then I got an immediate spanking, and I got grounded for it. So I was 100% right. I did what I said that I was going to do, and I was correct. But I showed up somebody that was in power, had authority over me. And those kind of behaviors made it very difficult, because that didn't happen like just a one time. It was multiple situations, but that is a particular story of times where I got in trouble for actually speaking up, and especially if I was right, then I got in even more trouble. And I was often doing things as a child of, like, trying to control and mitigate how much the parents were drinking. I remember telling my mom at a baby shower that she was drinking the wine too fast and that she was going to end up getting sick. And sure enough, she got mad at me too, and didn't think that her daughter should be telling her what to do, which Fair enough. However, somebody needed to be a voice of reason here. And so she proceeded to drink even more, even faster. And Sure enough, she ended up getting sick. And we were in my aunt's brand new car that she had just got. It was less than a month old. And my mom decides that she needs to throw up as my aunt is going down the highway, and she stuck her head out the window but faced forward so that the wind was coming in. And then when she threw up red wine, it all flew into the car onto me in the back seat, which was just absolutely freaking horrible. And then she got sick in the driveway when we got home, and all of these kind of things. And Yeah, and that was just the response because I tried to call out that this behavior, she was going to get herself in trouble, and sure enough, she did. And then my aunt had to clean up after her younger sister yet again. So these are some of the things that had kind of happened, and so because of those kind of experiences, and these aren't conscious decisions that you make as a child, but these experiences do start to shape and form how you react to certain things in your adult life. And so this could translate like being at work and you're asked your opinion on how something should go, or what strategies do you think. And maybe there's something that's going on that you know is wrong, but you don't actually want to speak up about it because in your past you got in trouble for speaking up about things. And so when you see those kind of patterns start to play out, when you are able to trace it back, you start to gain awareness and you can start to implement things to counteract that, right? And so a lot of times, if people don't feel like they can speak up about things and they have to hold it in and hold it in and hold it in, or just let it go, or be the bigger person, or you're older, you should know better, whatever the story or the line was that you were given when you were growing up of why you could not speak up about how you were feeling, about the anger that you felt. And I'm not just talking about you know because sometimes people think, well, I speak up about everything, I call everybody out on everything. And maybe you are the type that has the explosive temper and you like fly off the handle. That is still a problem. It's just the other side of the same coin. Is so now, because you fly off the handle of everything, nobody really takes it seriously of what you're doing. It's no different than a parent who screams at their kid all the time. There's a law of diminishing returns, and you end up not, the child learns not to listen and doesn't react. And you can tell somebody that regularly yells at their child because the kids like aren't even phased by it. You've seen this even if you're out at a restaurant or something like that, and it's like, or at a grocery store, and the mom is like, snapping off at the kids, and the kids are like completely oblivious because the volume hasn't gotten to the level that they're used to, so they just don't pay attention to it anymore. And I watched this growing up in my childhood as well, not just with me, because my way of coping with it was just to placate and do whatever I thought that they wanted. My cousin, on the other hand, he was a little bit more of a troublemaker, always getting in trouble, always breaking shit, always doing all kinds of whacked out stuff. And oddly, him and I were really good friends, and we hung out together. Um, Sorry, I was just remembering a time where there was like a 2 or 3 week period where we decided, instead of going to school, the schools that we were supposed to go to, for 2 weeks straight, we skipped school, but we went to all of our friends' schools and we'd show up at their classes and kind of stuff. So we did this for like 2 weeks. We just decided we'd get on a different bus and then just go for whatever. So my cousin was fun, but he was a troublemaker, and I was there to help mitigate it, to prevent getting into too much trouble. He was also the same cousin that I called when I had my suicide attempt, and he came running over. He had ran straight to my place, and what tipped him off was that I called him to tell him that I actually loved him, and he's like, that was the warning sign. That's the kind of experiences that we had. We just weren't open about that kind of stuff, and it's sad that one of your family members calling to tell you that you love them is a red flag that there's some sort of danger afoot. And he did come running over, and he called my aunt and my mom and got them to come. Yeah, you're all important and loved. Hope everyone has a good night. Oh, thank you so much, Noah. Very nice. Yeah, so being aware of these different patterns that you have, and how they end up affecting you. And then as you start to become aware of them, putting new things in place to start to build that muscle. So if you are somebody who didn't speak up very much, learning to speak up in small ways of being decisive about, say, where you want to go for dinner, right? Or if you order something, and I know before if a server had made a mistake on my order, I would just, it's okay, don't worry about it, I'll just eat it. I don't want to cause a problem. Oh, no, 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 we'll take it back. No, no, it's fine. I'll just deal with it. And so one of the things that I started to do is I would actually, and it was really scary at first when I started to exercise this. And it's no different than exercising muscle. It's hard at first, right? And so I would speak up on these little things, and I would like shake. And this is kind of where I was at. And it's funny when people um, sometimes tell me that, like, you're so confident, you're so self assured. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is not how I feel, right? That's not always what goes on the inside, right? So learning that piece was also a key indicator of, you can never judge your, and we do this all the time, is we judge our insides to other people's outsides, and what it is that they are displaying for us. And we forget to look within and understand that they have emotions too, if they're even if they're not feeling it. Because when people would tell me, like, you're so confident, you're so self-assured, and I'm like, are you out of your freaking mind? I am not confident, I am not self-assured, I am freaking scared most of the time. But I just learned to feel the fear and do it anyway, right? And so pushing myself through that is what actually started to breed some more confidence. And the more that you do it, you become desensitized to it. Just like when I was a teenager and we went to a friend's house for Halloween party, and they were playing Friday the 13th on VHS. And they kept and that was such a cool thing, right? The ability to actually rewind and rewatch everything, because we couldn't do that back then. But the the guys thought it was fun because it would scare the girls, right? And the girls, like, then they get all snuggly when they're scared. I guess that was the whole move, right? But they kept playing this part on repeat, and it really freaked me out. Of, like, this girl getting an axe to the head, and I was like, and then they kept rewinding it and playing it again and all that kind of stuff. But after a while, it was like no big deal. And then, I went through this whole phase where horror movies were a thing, and we were always watching them. Uh, Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, and a bunch of different ones that were playing when I grew up. Um, And you just learn to become desensitized to it, that it's not a big deal. The funny thing is I haven't watched any of that kind of stuff for such a long time that it would be a bit of a shock to the system, right? Um, the one thing that I did find, though, that was quite interesting is while I could watch stuff like that and it had no effect on me, if I read even a thriller novel, that I would have nightmares for weeks. So I could not actually read a horror movie book. I made the mistake of reading V.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic. And for months after I read that book, I had the worst nightmares. I'd wake up in a sweat. It was such a panic thing. And it was like, I'm like, that's not even like close to the stuff that I was watching in movies, but for some reason, reading it, I absorbed the information in a different way. So learning these different things was actually um, really valuable because you can see how you're affected by things. And I know for me, at least, when I am actually physically reading a book, I absorb that on such a deeper level compared to whether I listen to something or I watch something. It's like I process it differently. So that's which is important to understand, and I learned a lot of that stuff when I took an adult um, teaching certificate when I was in college back in 2009, 2010. Yeah, um, back then. So I learned about the difference of how you actually teach adults and how they learn information, how they absorb it, the various different styles, um, like auditory, kinesthetic, um, visual learners, right? Like people's different learning styles, and how they absorb that information. So um, for me, reading is a big one, right? So, and I tend to prefer. And if you try to just tell me something, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. And I'm also much more of a visual learner, that I just need to be able to see it and I will remember it. If I cannot see it, I cannot have that. The ability to retrieve that data quickly enough. Like I have to be able to visualize it. And that could even just be the way that the notes are written. So like a lot of times I would take notes if I went to meetings and stuff like that. And I would organize it in a different way. So I would more not each of the words, but I would remember the pattern of how the writing was on the paper, and I would be able to, that was enough of a visual cue to be able to pull and extract that information and remember what I was talking about there. So very much a visual learner, data retriever kind of thing. So that kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent. So I'm going to pull that back to the topic that we were discussing, which is dealing with the depression and knowing that that is anger turned inward. So when I started to recognize that when I felt these depressed feelings, where you're feeling lost, where you're feeling hopeless, I would start to look at what are the things that I've been feeling angry about, that I've been resentful about, that I don't feel like I can actually speak up about. And so I would start to do some journaling on that kind of stuff because when I wasn't actually strong enough to actually speak up about something, I would at least externalize it by writing it down and being able to get that visual cue of what was going on for me. And it helped me be a bit more objective about it. And then I could understand what's going on with me and then be able to decide whether or not, oh, I can now see this in a different perspective and it no longer is something that I'm angry about, or I can look at it and kind of go, no, this is still bothering me and I do feel like I need to actually speak up for a couple of different reasons. One, just so that I know for myself that I have taken that action to value myself enough to actually speak up, regardless of the other person's reaction to the information that I provide. The act of actually speaking up and advocating for yourself and being that champion for yourself, treating yourself like your best friend. Because I had no problem speaking up for somebody else. If I saw somebody else, whether that was somebody that was my friend or a coworker or whatever, and they were being treated unjustly, I had zero fear at being able to speak up about that, and I'd be like, no, that's not right, and this is why, and da 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 da, and I would just be able to clearly and calmly state that. But if it was for me, then I would let those same things, if they did it to me, it was no big deal. I just let it slide. I took the hit, and as long as they were picking on me, then that meant they were leaving somebody else alone. And again, that is a very common pattern of what I grew up with in my childhood, right? And I can recognize those connections now because I have done that inner work where I see the stuff that is going on for me today. So it's not like I went back to my childhood and I dug all this stuff up and all of that. That would have been way too friggin' much. So what I did is I talked about the things that I felt were holding me back in my day-to-day life, whether that was work or friends or family or any of that kind of stuff, where I just didn't feel like I was living the best version of myself. And I was hungry for this growth, and I was frustrated with different things that I didn't feel like I had any control over, that happened over and over again, that I would be upset about, and just didn't understand why it was the way that it was. And so learning to voice that was a huge part of the process, right? Hey, Joe, I'm from Canada. Where are you from? And so learning how to speak up about those things is something that is really important. And the more that you do this, to be able to advocate for yourself, for the people around you, and learning to do that. Now, if, like I said, if you're on the flip side where you're the one that is reacting and maybe you lose your temper really quickly, learning to mitigate that and get yourself to a calmer state, but also recognizing that at that point where you felt like, because I had to do both, right? So there'd be times where I just fly off the handle and I would lash out. And my brother, unfortunately, was the one that got the downward, shit rolls downhill kind of thing, right? Your stream is frozen. Looking forward to listening more. Okay. Oh, it's freezing. Is anybody else having trouble with that freezing? I'm not seeing it on my side. I do see the stream moving along. But Joe, just to let you know, I do upload these live videos to my YouTube channel, and you'll be able to watch the replay. So if you want to check out my YouTube channel, it's Coach Tina B 125, and all of the replays are noted are uploaded there, and you'll also see stuff like the artwork that I do behind me as the thumbnail. So keep an eye out for that, and hopefully the stream is actually moving along here. Okay, now, yeah. So like I said, if you have that temper side of you, learning to, oh, okay, it just came back. So, Joe, I'm not sure if you heard that, but you can check out my YouTube channel, Coach Tina B 125. I do upload these lives to that channel so that you can catch the replays and stuff like that. So, and like I said, my artwork is the thumbnails there, so that's how you know you're on the right channel. Okay, so if you are somebody that loses your temper, and your part of the path of recovery for that is not being reactive, being able to give yourself some space and time before you just go and pop off, and then also looking at how many times did you actually let that slide. Because I can promise you, you didn't go from 0 to 100. There were all these other pit stops along the way that you didn't actually voice how you felt. And you waited until it became a big problem before you said anything about it. And then when you do say something about it, at that point, the volume is at a 10, but that person is thinking it's a one off isolated incident. And they're like, dude, like, what the fuck's your problem, right? And you're like, I'm not overreacting. I've had enough. And it's like, so, and this can be as small as like the times where at work you finally fire off one of those emails where you're like, I've had enough of this bullshit. I've told these guys they need to do this and da 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 da, and you just go off on people, right? And it's like, those are almost always the times that you are not supposed to go off on somebody, I can promise. I can promise, right? Because think about it. If you were in a good space and you were feeling happy and you were feeling okay, that you didn't have a whole lot of pressure of what was going on, and you're just like, I'm not going to go off on this. It's the times that we are under stress, that we are in a state of fear, that we end up doing these kind of things. So starting to learn to trace back what's going on within ourselves. Um, how many times did we let things slide? Did we not speak up because we thought, it's no big deal. I'm just overreacting and letting it go. And so we end up creating our own problems because we're not honoring ourselves and we're not honoring what's going on with us. So and it was hard to learn to speak up about this stuff, and I had to practice it in certain ways. And then the funny thing is I would, because I learned to speak up and I would talk to somebody else calmly before it became a big deal. So while it was small, I had no problem managing the emotion of it, right? And I would just say something along the lines, hey, when you said this, I was feeling like you meant something like this. Is that the case, right? Or I'd clarify, or I'd seek to understand, and or I would explain, when that was said, this is how I felt about it, and I'm not sure if that's what you meant by it, right? And so always giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. So and I'll give them the chance to be able to explain, or it's like, oh geez, no, I didn't realize that that's how you were thinking. No, that's not what I meant at all. It was like, and sometimes they might even lie, and it's like whatever. So those kind of things, I let it slide as well, because the point isn't about trying to control their behavior. The point is the exercise of you actually learning to speak up for yourself and saying that's not cool. And in whatever way that you can do that. So when you first start to do it, you're probably going to be a little bit clumsy, a little bit derpy if you are not used to it. And especially if you're one of the ones that you let things build and build and build and build, and then you blow up, right? Um, so learning to address it while it's a small thing is just going to feel so foreign to you, and you're going to feel like you're making a mountain out of a molehill. I know that's how I was feeling when I first started addressing things, but what I found, it was so much easier to deal with that, and it allowed the relationships to stay intact rather than having this whole cool off period, because now you had this big fight about something, and you said things that you didn't mean, they said things that they didn't mean, and so now both of you are actually wounded, but now both of you are also trying to say, it's no big deal, we'll just let it go, whatever, it is what it is, and that's just the way they are, and all of that kind of stuff. And that causes problems not to actually get truly resolved, because in order for it to get resolved, there needs to be open, honest, clear communication for that to be resolved on both sides, right? And we both need to be able to speak up about those kind of things in order to keep the relationship happy and healthy and whole, right? And this applies whether it's your personal relationships, or if it is professional or family or significant other, any of those kind of things, it does make a big difference at being able to speak up. Because if not, what's going to end up happening is you have a power dynamic where somebody else is always very comfortable at being able to speak up. The other person is not very comfortable, they're not very skilled at it, they don't speak up, they become resentful about it. That anger that is not expressed turns into depression, that they are turning that anger in on themselves. And we start to become self critical, we start to beat up on ourselves, telling ourselves maybe we were taught this in our childhood that we're no good, we're a loser, we're this, we're that, any whatever the negative track that's going off in your head happens. It's because you didn't speak up about those things because you weren't taught that it was safe to actually speak up about it. And so for me, um, it was the recovery groups that I was actually in my 20s that helped me learn how to speak up about feelings, because one of the things that I did is I got very active in service and I would volunteer my time for that, and it was so valuable to do that because I learned so many skills at being able to run business meetings, and this was before I even knew what the hell a business meeting was. But I would be on these teams and these committees for conferences and all this different kind of stuff. And participating in service and giving back allowed me to be around people that were further along in the growth journey that I learned from. I saw their examples of how to do things. Their examples of being able to speak up in a calm way without it turning into a big brouhaha fight kind of thing. It didn't turn into a big screaming match, that they could calmly and clearly be able to state what was going on, what they expected to go differently for the next time, and how to deal with all of that kind of stuff. And that was super valuable to see healthy expressions of communication that didn't turn into these big knock 'em down, drag 'em out fights. So learning to speak up about what it is that you're feeling, the closer you can do to speak up about it in the moment without being emotional about it, without flying off the handle about it, the less likely you are to feel these feelings of depression, because you do have a healthy avenue to be able to speak up about the things that you feel are bothering you. Because if not, the only choice is you don't speak up about it, you get resentful about it, and even if you give, because before it turns to depression, there's going to be little things like you might give sarcastic digs. So that's if you're using sarcasm and giving everybody or giving people a shot or giving them a dig, that kind of stuff, that is you're leading yourself down the path to resentment, because you're not truly speaking up, you're punishing, you're trying to hurt somebody deliberately because you felt hurt by what they said, but you're still not actually speaking up about what you were actually hurt about. It requires you to actually be vulnerable, for you to actually look at your feelings and kind of go, ouch, that friggin' hurt. And I know it's just words, but those still hurt. I know you didn't throw sticks and stones, but those words do actually hurt us. They actually hurt more, and they stick in our mind more if we agree with them. Okay? If we agree with them, because somebody can talk shit about you if you're like, I don't respect your opinion. I don't have any I don't care what you think about me, but it's the people that we do care what they think about us, because they are important people in our lives. That's when it gets in. That's when we're like, oh, well, if they don't like me, then what, right? And so this whole process of learning to speak up, even if it is a person that we value and we care about deeply, even if it is an authority figure that we look up to and respect, learning to be able to speak up about those things is not something that's easy, right? And even with the awareness, even with the recovery and the healing and all of that kind of stuff, we're all susceptible to that, right? We don't want to be the one that, overreacts and you know, is nitpicking at every little thing and all of those kind of stuff. But sooner or later, you do have to look and honor your own feelings, because if not, you'll get to the point you're going to blow up, and all of these things that could have been dealt with in smaller, more manageable chunks at the time closest to it's like no different than training a dog, right? Uh, show them, you can't come home from work and see that they've messed on the floor. If you don't catch them in the act of it or closest to them, they're not going to make the connection. All they're going to do is you walked in the door and now you're yelling at them. They don't understand it's because they messed on the floor, right? So it's the same kind of concept. The closer you can get to the actual incident of when it actually happened and being able to speak up about it or call it out in real time, then the better it is, because now the person can see it's like, oh yeah, I guess, sorry, I didn't really realize that my tone was off, or the way that I said it. Because sometimes it's not what we say, it's how we say it that actually hurts people's feelings. Now, sometimes we can say things perfectly fine, and somebody else who maybe they would normally, it doesn't bother them, but in that particular day they were also dealing with other stuff, they're fearful. Still being able to talk to somebody and talk it through doesn't mean that you have to take on that ownership of it. But what you can do is use that as an opportunity to help the other person understand what it is that is going on, that this particular time they're a little bit more sensitive to it, right? If you open that door, you have that open line of communication, they might realize it's like, well, you know what, I was really stressed about we're not going to meet our numbers, and if we don't have this, then this is going to happen, and I just really needed this extra help. I needed this stuff to happen. And so being able to have that communication is going to be key. That way, you're not feeling depressed, you're not feeling resentful, you're not letting things slide that actually need to be addressed. And this happens all the time. I see this in business so many times, that there's leaders that they're mad about stuff that their team is doing, but they let it slide because, well, every time that I speak up, then they hate me, and even a boss hates being hated, right? And even though they're paid and they're supposed to be used to it, they're supposed to be tough enough. We're all just human, and nobody likes to be hated, right? People always like to know that they feel valued, right? So making sure that we all feel that way, even when we are in conflict, even when we are in disagreement. Um, so anytime that I've ever given feedback where I've had to give corrective feedback, I always try to, hey Wayne, good to see you. I've always tried to give positive affirmation, add, hey, this is, I love that you're doing this. I really like that you contributed this in this meeting. Um, this is something that I can see that we need to work on, and this is what I would like to see the outcome of, and do you have any ideas on that kind of stuff? I would get their feedback, and then I'd wrap the conversation up with making sure that I provided them with additional affirmation of like, hey, I really love that idea that you brought up about this particular problem, and I think that that is going to be an awesome way for us to be able to resolve this, and we're going to be able to get our targets met, and I can see this going really well. So like reaffirming and sandwiching the two positives between the corrective action. You have a problem, you're single, Uh, no, I'm not looking for dates. This is not what this channel is about. If you want to talk about depression, anxiety, you need some help with that kind of stuff, I am a happiness coach. I'd be more than happy to do that. I am not looking for a relationship. So sorry to disappoint, guys. But feel free to stick around and listen to the lives, ask questions on those kind of things. And if you're single and you're looking for somebody, then I recommend some dating apps or anything else like that. This is probably not the best area to do that. Okay? So, guys, I think with that, we're going to wrap it up here. If you have any comments or questions or things that you need some help with, you would like me to do a training on that, let me know. I'd be more than happy to create a training, and I will be back on again tomorrow. Like I had mentioned earlier, if you're coming in late and you want to catch up on what this live was about, I will be uploading this video to my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. If you want to go over there and give a subscribe, it will notify you whenever I upload a new video, and then you can take a watch at it there. Okay? So have a great night, guys, and we will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.